A top government official in charge of putting out the country's jobs data has been fired after Friday's disappointing jobs report drew President Trump's ire. Let's discuss now with economist and president of the Budget Lab at Yale University, Natasha Sarin. She was also a counselor to President Biden's Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen. Natasha, great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So the president was asked whether anyone could trust the jobs numbers after he fired this official, and this was his response.
Going forward, why should anyone trust the numbers?
Well, that's
and
the
if
big
you're
thing. You're right. No, you're right. Why should anybody trust numbers? I believe the numbers were phony, just like they were before the election, and there were other times. So you know what I did? I fired her.
right.
I don't know if the reporter got to finish the question, which was trust the numbers before or after the firing. I mean, how should people, how should business leaders, how should lawmakers, et cetera, how can they, this point forward now, rely on unemployment or employment data put out by the government?
So the thing that I think it's really important to emphasize is that until this moment, I think the right way to think about our government statistics is really that we are the envy of the world with respect to our capacity to collect information in real time about important economic indicators like the state of our labor market. And it's really a remarkable thing that government statisticians do. They survey all these businesses constantly to try to learn information about the ways in which they're making choices about the types of workers that they bring on. The challenge with that type of a data structure is that invariably you are trying to learn in real time based on businesses who are responding to you. And so these types of revisions that the president is talking about, the fact that the numbers move up or the numbers move down in particular months, I can't emphasize enough how normal that is. It is incredibly traditional. It is not at all out of the norms for these data for this type of data to be adjusted that reflects better information that statisticians receive as they continue to learn about the labor market. The only thing that is abnormal here is that the president has taken the totally unheard of action of deciding to fire someone who is not even the person collecting this data. This is the person who's responsible for overseeing the agency and the work of thousands of career economists who are doing an incredible amount of labor to put these numbers together.
So let's look at that structure, so to speak, in the report that got under the skin of the president, ruffled his feathers. The jobs report released yesterday said that the jobs numbers for May and June were revised down dramatically by more than 250,000 jobs. May saw just 19,000 new jobs added. June had only 14,000. I mean, huge decreases. The president, is trying to say that these numbers are not accurate, mostly because, he said it. He doesn't like those numbers. So what is your response to not only what he is saying, but I hear you. You do trust the data that has been revealed here. What does this say about the overall economy? That the lack of jobs is a response to what? How should people decipher this?
What the data are telling us are, frankly, that the tariffs are starting to have a real bite in the economy. And in reality, what we learned yesterday is that we've known that economic growth has been slowing over the course of the last 6 months as a result of effective tariff rates that today are 8 times what they were when the president took office. And there was a bit of a puzzle. The labor market seemed to be chugging along even though growth was slowing. What we learned yesterday is that the labor market, in fact, has not been chugging along. It has been weakening over the course of the last few months, and that is incredibly expected. The work that I do with my colleagues at the Budget Lab at Yale has been trying to model the impact of these tariffs on the economy. And what we conclude is that as a result of tariff rates this high, households are going to face thousands of dollars of increased prices, and the economy is going to be smaller because demand is going to be lower. And in fact, that is exactly what we are seeing. We are seeing employment start to taper off, and that is what you would expect from choosing tariff rates this high. So kind of my message for policymakers as they're looking at this data is that not to be frustrated with the data collection process, which again is a remarkable feat that this country is able to accomplish, but really to be frustrated with the policies that we're choosing that are getting us to an economy that is slowing, not one that is growing.
Are you going to believe the next round of data, knowing that this round so upset the president that he removed the chief?
You know, I am incredibly disheartened and disappointed by this decision because I hope that we remain a country where we can trust these types of data sources because, frankly, there is no replacement for this type of data collection. There is no private data infrastructure that exists that can replace what the Bureau of Labor Statistics puts out each month. But I am pretty worried that we're in an environment where it starts to look like there is politicization of this type of government data, the way it starts to look like there is politicization of the Federal Reserve. And all of that has the impact of making industry, of making consumers, of making other countries, of making the American people frankly suspect about the nature of our economic strength, which relies very heavily on these type of infrastructures and makes us weaker, not stronger.
All right. Natasha Sarin, thank you so much. I'd love to have you back, especially as the next round of numbers come out. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks so much.